So the shoulder blade is something that is quite often new and unusual for people to understand, that we can and should move our shoulder blade in all sorts of different directions. And actually, for us, the sign of a healthy shoulder blade is the ability that you can do that. From a research perspective, we know that shoulder blades that don't move can predispose us to being less variable and less adaptable to being able to move our shoulders. And that's why we're going to introduce some terminology for being able to explore what a shoulder blade can do. Because when we're going to be maybe challenging people to go upside down onto your hands and add in higher load, then the terminology wants to be something that we are on the same page and you're not having to think, what does that terminology mean? Because there's, from a pain perspective, there's probably not a right way to move the shoulder blade. But if we're going to be looking at really high load activities, so more in the performance realm, then there is some organizational stuff that's probably a good idea. So if I was to ask you to just simply raise your shoulders into this position here, most people are going to be comfortable with this, and we could even give this a name and say that this is shoulder elevation. So if I was to draw that on here, my really nice accurate drawing of a shoulder blade from behind, this movement shrugging up would be called elevation. Okay, and that's going to be in that position. We could even do the same movement with the hand overhead and pressing the shoulder blade up, and that's elevation. The opposite of that would be to be able to take our shoulder blade down, taking the shoulder blade and ears as far apart. That would be taking the shoulder blade this way, and that one we call depression. Spelled right? We call that depression, okay? And most people are fairly comfortable with the idea to be able to move the shoulders up and down in this direction. The next movement that we can do with the shoulder blades, and if you try this, would be to try and spread your shoulder blades apart as far as you can, okay? Wrapping the shoulder blades around the rib cage. And that movement here would be retraction, okay? With the opposite of that movement, bringing the shoulder blades together, being called retraction. So that would be squeezing them in this direction and retraction. So we've got these movements that we can do: up, down, or elevate, depress. We've got protraction, retraction. So we've got this nice cross direction, and we could do that in various arm positions. Okay, terminology is the most important thing here, because we could do that in a whole host of different ways. Now, there's other movements that we can do with our shoulder blade which are involving the arm, okay, and that would be called upward rotation. So as I bring my arm up into this position here, my shoulder blade, if this arm's coming up here, is having to rotate upwards, and we call that upward rotation. So this would be this direction here. People talk about being able to have a relationship between how much the shoulder rotates and how much the scapula should rotate, 1 to 2 ratios in terms of degrees. That's probably not something that we're going to be too fussed about, but the idea that we can rotate the shoulder blade upwards is an important one, because this movement is something that certain really high skilled movers are able to do without moving their arm. But if you have a go at moving your arm up, you will be able to you will be doing or exploring upward rotation. And if you are to then bring your arm down, you will be doing the opposite, which will be downward rotation. So then we've got another one. There. Okay. Some people will have heard of certain things to do with this shoulder blade, like winging scapula and all these sorts of things, which people say is sometimes a bad thing. It can be a demonstration that we've lost scapular control, but actually the ability to tilt this shoulder blade forward or anterior would be what would be typically seen as a winging scapula. That would be a skill, because some people can actually just anterior rotate or wing their scapula. That would be anterior rotation. I'm not going to write that one on. You could also do the opposite, which is posterior rotation, but that just the point that I'm trying to get to there is the fact that we've got lots of options of movements in our shoulder blade. Okay, and if we want to be able to get into a position where we're going to be loading those positions, first and foremost, we've got to be able to do those positions. Because when you're upside down, when you're on your hands, when you're hanging, these sorts of cues can become completely flipped around. Okay, and what you want to be able to get, what I want you to be able to get our head around here is the fact that we could be doing these movements. We could be doing one movement with this shoulder blade and the complete opposite with this one. So we could start putting some of these together. So when you're practicing, you could maybe try and say, right, I'm going to protrude my left shoulder blade and elevate. I'm going to retract my right shoulder blade and depress. Then I'm going to try and do the opposite. Okay, maybe we can try and do upward rotation of the shoulder blade and depression, upward rotation and elevation, and get to a point where we can actually start really exploring moving between all of these different movements available in our shoulder blades before we then get into a position where we're going to be asking us to be strong through those movements. We're going to have a series of videos for you to try out off the back of this, but this is a terminology that we want to get straight off the bat.